So, in the 14th Istanbul Apparel Conference, so we continue to host our guests. Brave New World, that is the title of the session that we have. And we have a very distinguished name that we were together, CEO of Mavi, Cüneyt Yavuz. Good morning, welcome. I'm just more than happy to be here with you. I'm also very happy to see you again. Actually, a year passed by so fast. It was like yesterday I was saying to myself, back again here. A great conference that started so well, and we will have a great panel, and we'll continue with enthusiasm. Of course, I actually have full trust on you as an anchor, and you're doing it as good as me, much better than me. So, Brave New World, maybe we can a bit, elaborate on it. You know, the developed countries in particular are industrialized, they grow, but they pollute the environment. Now they are saying that you, developing countries, there's climate change and you're having too much carbon emission, so stop, do not pollute the environment. So they're putting the burden on the developing countries. Now the developed countries already polluted the environment, and now saying, now we're at the point of growing, but they're saying stop, you should not pollute the environment. It is like the shift of burden from one shoulder to the other, how it should be shared. Of course, we cannot underestimate the environment. It's either for the developed or the developing countries. We all assume different responsibilities, but we all have our challenges. There's also the economic side of the issue. Therefore, in this panel, as you mentioned, we have an entrepreneur and we have an academician with us, and a representative of a retail brand. So we will actually discuss the topic from different dimensions altogether. So let's say a couple of words about our guests. Beysin Tekniel at Mavi at the same time, sustainability consultant and expert on product life cycle, and at the same time assessment. So I think there's something to do with sustainability at Mavi, I guess. Yeah, of course, if you would like to be one of the best companies in the world, the most institutionalized one, of course, as Mavi, as a company, of course, we have to assume responsibility in terms of sustainability. Beysin is our captain, our team leader, also with us, and we'll be speaking about what is going on inside Mavi in terms of sustainability. I'm sure that he'll be sharing some best practices with us. From İzmir Economy University, Görkem Üçtuğ will be with us, and will be sharing his own experiences about sustainability, energy economy, clean energy that he's working on. And at the site, again, we'll be together. And lastly, Marcello Palazzi, B-Lab ambassador, now partners founder, and will be joining us from the Netherlands. Yes, Marcello is joining us from the Netherlands, and actually very distinguished, as you mentioned, in terms of carbon emissions. We're well trained from academic circles. Of course, we'll ask our associated professor Üçtuğ. Same for Marcello, a very important name is with us, a very important entrepreneur, and a very important, at the same time, consultant, I would say, spending majority of his business life on this topic. So we are also more than happy to host Marcello here. So I don't want to take too much of your time. So I will leave the microphone, and I will give the floor to Cüneyt Yavuz. And perfect. Now, I think I have to look at this camera, so I'll have the chance to see the guests as well. And I will continue with English.
It's great to see you.
Merhabalar,
I hope you can see me and hear me as well as I do you. You all look great. So it's fantastic to see you guys. Without really, ado, if you're okay, I'd like to start with Marcello immediately to set the scene. I would like Marcello to give us a bit of a perspective and assess what you do in terms of assessing individual companies and their readiness on sustainability and regeneration. Give us a bit more perspective on sustainability and regeneration. Marcello, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. You can hear me well?
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be with you. I would love to be there in person. I've been a friend of Turkey and Istanbul for many, many years. So the question, I'm going to use two new words, perhaps. One word is disruption, and one word is regeneration. So I think in the apparel industry, there is a lot of disruption going on. I am particularly focusing on a group I've started in Europe called the B Corps. These are companies, about 4,100 companies around the world, including Patagonia, for example, Allbirds, Finisterre, and maybe 25 other apparel companies. So take a case of Allbirds. Allbirds is a California company. They did an IPO, and they are valued at over $2 billion for a relatively new company. They decided to make sneaker shoes without leather, so using artificial or alternative to leathers, and using wool. So they make sneakers of wool, and they've been very, very successful. So this is very disruptive, and it's also very regenerative, because it's actually a way of using wool, using, of course, the animal sheep in a way that is regenerative. Patagonia is another very important B Corp. They have very close to nature. They say we are in business to save nature. And the way they have promoted themselves, their marketing campaign has been very attractive to, say, younger consumers around the world. These are just two examples. But on your question on sustainability and measuring, in this movement of the B Corps in 80 countries, we have created indicators and assessment. It's called the B Corp Impact Assessment. Any company can use it online for free. And it is a sort of a way to start on this journey towards, say, sustainability first and regeneration second. Regeneration goes beyond sustainability. It is about, as the word says, our own bodies, our cells regenerate themselves, every nanosecond. So the regeneration is very close to our, human bodies. And we see the same happening in economics and in business, that as questions that you are addressing in your wonderful conference, sustainability, climate, innovation, entrepreneurship, how can we shift it more towards regeneration? So you can use the B Corp Impact Assessment. It's online. We have wonderful partners in Istanbul, in Turkey. And the final thing to say is, it is very close to a sort of respect for people and nature and planet. If you stop, in general, if we all, because we're all together in this, if we stop abusing our nature and respecting people, that's a way to become more regenerative. So this would be my quick answer to your question. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think that was a great introduction. And also, I think your introduction has given us a chance to broaden our perspective when it comes to sustainability and regeneration. I would like to move on to our professor, to Professor Görkem. And I think he has one of the most challenging questions at hand. And here is the question, Professor. We keep talking about, when also we were doing the introduction with Barış here, we were talking about the gap of unequal, the gap and the unequal footing between developed and developing countries, and how are we to tackle the climate crisis and reach a net zero emission, considering these two different, let's say, states and positions in the world. So how do we deal with climate change in a just and equitable way? Can you give us some perspective? So I'll pass on this mega billion-dollar question to you, Professor.
Okay, thank you. And that is indeed a challenging question. Well, to begin with, I would like to start with a historical perspective. When we look at the cumulative carbon emissions from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in mid-19th century until today, we see that the developed countries of today, I'm talking about USA, European Union nations, Canada, Australia maybe, they are responsible for approximately 79% of all the carbon emissions, or the human-made carbon emissions made until today. So if we have a problem, it is mostly caused by, it has been caused by the developed nations. But today, we have a totally different situation. Today, when you look at the annual carbon emissions, it is the developing nations, mostly India and China, that are responsible. In fact, approximately 63% of global annual carbon emissions are made by developing nations. So, how did we get to this point? Today's developed countries use their carbon-intensive energy sources, the most prominent of which is coal, very excessively in order to improve their economy and become the global economic powerhouses that they are today. And as a result of all these efforts, now their economy is strong enough to achieve a transition from what we call conventional sources of energy towards renewable energy. And as a result, they are reducing their emissions. At least I can say this about European Union. America is still in the transition phase. But the European Union has significantly reduced the emissions as a result of their transition. And now they expect all the other countries to do that. And for the developing nations, it is not an easy task. As you have said earlier, these countries need to improve their economy. They need to stabilize their economy before they can achieve such a transition. So expecting everyone to perform the same from a climate change perspective is obviously not a fair thing to do. But I would like to mention one of the key aspects of Paris Agreement in that sense. Paris Agreement, as you know, was signed in late 2016, and it has been recently ratified in Turkey as well. And one of the key features of Paris Agreement is the funding of the developing nations by the developed nations, so that these developing nations can invent or improve existing technologies about carbon reduction or carbon capture. They can educate their public about the importance of climate change and how it will affect our lives, so that even the public can take precautionary measures. So a total of $100 billion of funding is targeted to be transferred over a 10-year period. And so far, if we talk about European Union, already $2.5 billion worth of funding has been transferred, and over the course of 4 years, another $15 billion is expected to be transferred to developing nations. So this is, at least in idea, the way the climate change problem will be solved. By receiving this funding, these developing nations are supposed to accelerate their transition from conventional towards renewable energy and employ certain policies which would see a reduction in carbon emissions. And hopefully, I would like to emphasize the word hopefully here, this will enable a fair and just sharing of responsibilities between developed and developing countries. Will Paris Agreement be able to achieve this? To be honest, it's too early to say, so we will see this in the years to come.
Thank you, Professor. It's really, what you're mentioning is really critical, because in the end, it's one little blue planet that we are all sharing. And it is very critical that, you know, we're happily able to live and survive in this environment. I think it's good to hear that the intentions and the strategies moving forward are laid out. And as you were mentioning, hopefully both we have the time and the resources and the shared responsibilities between developed and developing countries to move in the right direction. Now I'd like to turn over to Beysin and maybe zoom into a specific company, Mavi, which is quite busy in terms of taking a lot of action in terms of sustainability. And it is also a company that is operating both in developed and developing countries. So Beysin, can you give us a perspective of what sustainability means for Mavi and how we take a look at it from a developed and developing country operating company perspective?
So yeah, sustainability is a constant learning process for Mavi. Our sustainability transformation began in 2019. We started our journey by setting up a dedicated team from individuals with excellent understanding of Mavi's values and culture. This team initiated and continues to own our sustainability efforts. As a company, we teamed up with S360, a leading sustainability consultancy firm, to help us with our transformation. We started our journey right away by introducing sustainable products in the markets that we operate. We wasted no time in doing life cycle assessment studies and CDP reporting, which were both considered as advanced topics within our roadmap. These projects paved our way for us to improve our sustainability structure and efforts. We are in a sprint mode to catch up in areas where we are lagging and becoming one of the best-in-class companies in the world. As of today, we have a holistic approach to sustainability. We have established our sustainability committee and introduced 6 working groups to manage sustainability across all functions at Mavi. These groups are focused on specific topics such as environment, employees, customers, supply chain, products, and corporate governance. All these groups have their own roadmaps to achieve best practices on sustainability issues. Our aim is to progress on sustainability measures wherever we can as an apparel retailer. From our stores to our head office, from our jean products to our suppliers' cardboard boxes, we are doing everything we can to introduce sustainable practices in our way of doing business. Our All Blue sustainability strategy is built on sustainable growth through quality. This strategy has also become the namesake for our sustainable collection. All Blue products are made with sustainable materials, such as organic, recycled, and upcycled materials, and they are manufactured under strict sustainable processes. They're also all vegan. Day by day, we are expanding our offer of sustainable products. Our All Blue products' share of sales have already doubled in 2019 compared to 2019. We are happy to note that customers are showing huge interest in our sustainable products. We are extremely encouraged by our customers' reaction, and we are confident that we will win together. The defining property of our sustainability approach is the pricing of our sustainable products. Unlike most brands, we believe sustainable products should be the norm, not the premium exception. Pricing of our sustainable products reflects this understanding. And in terms of our climate impact, we initiated energy efficiency programs and started using renewable energy wherever possible to reduce our direct carbon emissions. We also introduced our first eco store in Istanbul. These stores are built with sustainable materials and they use less water and less energy compared to conventional stores. We are aware that our biggest impact lies with the design and buying choices we make. Sustainable, lower carbon raw materials are especially critical for us. Currently, as the first Turkish brand to disclose this carbon footprint transparently, we got a B grade from CDP. We are encouraged with this rating and take on responsibility to further improve our rating in our coming years. Of course, we are a denim-centric lifestyle brand. Our denim products are especially important to us. We've conducted life cycle assessment studies on 37 fabrics and 43 of our denim products. These studies revealed product-specific environmental impact results and enabled us to make informed design decisions. Conducting LCA studies now increases our resilience towards future regulations such as the EU Green Deal and product environmental footprint initiatives. So yes, as Mavi, we progressed a lot over the last 2 years, and we will keep this momentum going for many years to come.
Thank you, Beysin, for this introduction. I would like to now turn back to Marcello. And, now that we have an example of a company, but I think you have many companies that you operate with and you do business with. Can you just go on and talk? I mean, you yourself, I just also have to add this, are a great entrepreneur yourself, a living embodiment of that. So can you go on and elaborate a bit on entrepreneurship and how disruptive regenerations come into play from your experience?
So fantastic. I love the story of Mavi. So a little challenge, for example, in the Netherlands, where I live in Amsterdam, we have a B Corp company called Mud Jeans, M-U-D, mud, like mud. And Mud Jeans, it's been quite successful, very successful. They have a model where you don't buy your jeans, you rent your jeans. So say for 6 or 7 euros a month or $8 a month, you can have a pair of jeans and you can send them back at the end when you don't want to wear them anymore, and they give you a new pair. So it's rental instead of buying. And of course, the model is circular model. So the jeans that you return back after 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, they get recycled and they use the material to make new jeans. So that's a disruptive model, and they've been very successful. People like it. So it's maybe an idea also for Mavi in your countries. The disruptive regeneration, what's happening in many industries is that, in the Fortune 500, every 10 years, 75% of these companies change. you have new competitors. There's very dynamic entrepreneurial scene everywhere, and I've seen it in Turkey too. So in the apparel industry, we have another company, a B Corp, called Veja Shoes, VEJA. They also use organic cotton. They use natural rubber products from the Amazons and the rainforest, and they've been very successful. They have most young people now in France and in Belgium buy Veja shoes, and they don't buy Nike anymore. And I can go on and on. I mentioned All Birds, very, very successful. I also mentioned it's a different industry, but you know a company called Oatly, yes. Otly, makes this plant-based alternative to milk. Now, Oatly has sales of 400 million, and their stock price, their asset value is 14 billion. Fantastic. 14 billion, which is bigger than Danone yogurt, for example. So within 5 years, they created a very disruptive brand. So we should look at all these opportunities to disrupt, in a sense, in a positive way, and not, I don't mean negative disruption, positive disruption, regenerative disruption. And I think Turkey has a huge potential. I was making a note for myself, maybe some of the Turkish companies in apparel can get together and work more closely in producing a global brand. That will be very, very important for your value added, and be known in the world for being a regenerative producer.
Fantastic. It's a lot of inspiration. And as always, I call this steal with pride, and sharing from other companies, learning from other companies, and then applying the best practices is phenomenally important. I'd like to move back to the professor and come back to, again, a bit more of a policy perspective. The other question I have for the professor is, what challenges does the current EU Green Deal pose on Turkish manufacturing industry, and how fair do you think it is for EU to be pressuring its neighboring developing countries to this end? It's important that, I know the Turkish whole apparel industry is working really hard, and the ecosystem is phenomenally strong. It's one of our export dynamos. But having said that, and Europe happens to be our biggest business partner in this perspective. So your perspective in terms of EU, Turkey, and EU developing country relationship is of value. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think the biggest challenge that we will be facing soon as part of the European Green Deal is the carbon tax, which will be introduced in 2026, which gives us slightly more than 4 years to prepare. So let me briefly explain what carbon tax is. For each product, let's give an example. Since we are in an apparel industry conference, let's give an example of a T-shirt. So the production of the raw material that goes into the T-shirt, then the transportation of this raw material, the production activities inside the factory, and then the transportation of the finished product. All these, what we call life cycle stages, have carbon emissions with them, associated with them. So we add these up, and this is called the carbon footprint of the product. Now, each product will be given a limit for its carbon footprint as part of this new policy. And if the actual carbon footprint of a product exceeds its limit, then that product will be subject to a carbon tax if it is to be sold within the borders of the European Union. So this tax will inevitably increase the price of the product and consequently reduce its demand. So this is the current challenge. This is the official policy that will be active in 2026. Already, several European companies are sensitive about the products that they buy from their suppliers, one of which is Turkey. As you mentioned earlier, Turkey is European Union is the biggest export market for Turkey. So some of our companies have already started planning and actively working on this issue, but it will become a much more widespread problem in the years to come. So the biggest challenge actually associated with the carbon tax is that the energy that we use for the production of our products, again, we can talk about the T-shirt. Companies can increase the use of renewable energy. They can prefer sustainable raw materials, and these are all perfect. But at the end of the day, we have to use the grid electricity for our production processes. And the grid electricity in Turkey is unfortunately quite carbon intensive. Approximately 60% of our electricity is still obtained by using fossil fuels. Now, this number has reduced significantly, and the share of renewables is increasing steadily in Turkey, which is a very positive trend. And I hope in the years to come, it will be even better. But still, compared to many European countries, our electricity is carbon intensive, which inherently makes our products carbon intensive. So we have a disadvantage for the time being. So with the increasing share of renewables and maybe with the introduction of nuclear energy into our energy mix, the carbon emissions of our grid electricity will reduce, and consequently, the products produced in Turkey will be able to compete with the products produced elsewhere in terms of their environmental sustainability. Because from an economic point of view, Turkey is a very preferable market to purchase from. But this new policy will make our lives a bit difficult. But hopefully, these things will change, because Turkey is a very rapidly adapting country. No matter what sort of policy we are talking about, Turkey can adapt very rapidly. This is, something almost genetical. So we respond to change very rapidly, and I think this is what we will observe in the case of carbon emissions as well. Regarding the second part of your question, if it is fair for the EU to pressure its stakeholders. So, well, we have a problem today. It's a very serious problem. It's going to affect our lives, all of our lives, very significantly. So I don't think we have the luxury of pointing out fingers to one another. So we obviously, as I have already mentioned in my answer to your earlier question, the problem that we face today has been mainly caused by today's developed nations. So obviously, it is not fair for them to expect all the other countries, developing countries, underdeveloped countries, to achieve a rapid transition. But if we want to tackle this problem of climate change, we have to take action. And in that regard, I consider the Green Deal imposed by the European Union not fair, but necessary. So I would call it a necessary evil, if you will.
Thank you. I think that's a fair testament, and it's the right move to move forward. Now that our focus is on Turkey, Beysin, can you elaborate from a Mavi's perspective and Mavi's business? Where does Turkey come into play? Turkish manufacturing base, Turkey sourcing, doing business out of Turkey. What's Mavi's take with your sustainability leadership with regards to being in Turkey and with all the challenges that have been mentioned, whether it's entrepreneurship, innovation, regenerative approach, as mentioned by Marcello, or as our Professor Görkem was mentioning, in terms of what are all the policy pressures that are coming through?
So 80% of our products are made in Turkey. Turkey has an excellent, high-quality textile manufacturing ecosystem. Especially on denim, Turkey has the best manufacturers like Erak and Tayex. Our well-established, long-lasting relationships with local suppliers enable us to have increased control on our sourcing efforts. We enjoy increased speed, flexibility, and right first-time rates on our local orders. With our local suppliers, we have an increased understanding of business needs. In Turkey, it is very easy to find a supplier that can satisfy our needs. And knits and denim suppliers of Turkey are especially strong. They are very flexible and always respond in a positive way to our design requests. Other wear suppliers are also getting better every day. Another issue is social compliance. It is crucial for us. Our internal audit team is conducting social audits to ensure fair working standards and social compliance. Many of our local suppliers are also working with other well-established premium brands, and this makes our social compliance issues easier. These manufacturers already have certifications like SEDEX and BSCI, so they have already proven themselves on social compliance. Sustainability in our supply chain is, of course, very important. With each new local Turkish supplier that we are considering for manufacturing, we are doing an assessment regarding their sustainability. We are assessing to see if these suppliers fit the Mavi's vision for the next 2-3 years. We are doing to see if they can adapt our future sustainability standards. Sustainable materials, of course, is another important element. Due to rising demand, sustainable, environmentally better materials are facing capacity shortages, and increased costs. Especially organic cotton became a very valuable and scarce commodity. Since we are trying to provide our sustainable products on a fair price, these cost increases affect our sourcing efforts. I believe investing in sustainable materials can provide a lucrative revenue for Turkish suppliers. Another area that Turkish manufacturers should consider developing themselves is sustainable product development. We are seeing that most sustainable product offerings usually have one dimension, one component meeting sustainability criteria. Manufacturers should adopt a life cycle approach while designing their sustainable product offerings. They should consider all the elements, all the parts of a product to consider as sustainable. So overall, having a local supply chain in Turkey is a tremendous advantage for us. And it is one of the highlights of our quality-driven, efficient sourcing model. It is one of our strong suits that increases our competitiveness.
Fantastic. Thank you, Beysin. We're in the final round, and as always, we're down into a stretch of lasting minutes. So I would like the final round to be as precise and as to the point as possible to make sure that we don't have the conference lag further than it's necessary. Marcello, to wrap up, your reflections, and can you share with us your innovative ideas and examples from companies that you have worked with, and any final closing remarks that you may want to share with us in this conference with regards to sustainability, regenerative approaches, and your experiences?
So, yes, with pleasure. So my two final words will be innovation and collaboration. So innovation, I'll give you one more example. We have a B Corp in Italy called Reda, R-E-D-A. They are an old company, 150 years old. They make textile products, and their latest products are suited for new casual kind of clothing. So, no longer wearing a suit like I'm wearing a suit now, but the suit that is flexible, that stretches, that if you want, you can climb a mountain with. There's a lot of it. They're also doing a lot of innovation around including, digital mesh inside the textile, and that's all about innovation. So innovation is really important. The second thing is collaboration. I think that all the companies in Turkey that are working in the apparel industry could really collaborate more closely with each other. And then the final objective is you have to create a brand so that around the world, people will come to know products made in Turkey, either with a very well-known global brand, like Zara did in Spain, from Spain. So you need a few global brands that are made in Turkey, and collaboration between, say, the new disruptive entrepreneurs with new ideas and the existing companies. This is quite a difficult balance to find. Too often, the older companies dominate the industry, and you want to have that kind of a disruptive element of newcomers coming in. So innovation, collaboration, and branding. And I think you have a very good starting point. The final thing, which I really like what the professor said about the carbon pricing and so on, Patagonia has been very successful because they basically created an image where people would pay a bit more for products. So that connection with the customer is also very, very important. Yes. So you have to create a brand. This is the power of brand, a brand that people buy, even if it's a bit more expensive than other brands. So don't only compete on price, but compete on quality, on innovation, etc. So fantastic. I think you have a very good opportunity.
Thank you, Marcello. Last 4 minutes, so 2 minutes each, Professor and Beysin, from here on. Professor, you had mentioned about the carbon measurements that was going on, and I know you do a lot of work in terms of measuring carbon emissions. Can you give us a bit more perspective on how does a company measure its carbon emission, what you're doing or what you're suggesting, or what sort of consultancy work you're doing when it comes to companies and their carbon emissions?
Well, in order to be able to accurately monitor the carbon emissions of a product or a service, the companies have to employ a life cycle approach, as Mr. Tekniel has previously mentioned. So a life cycle approach includes all the stages associated with the supply of this product or service, starting from the raw material until the end-of-life treatment, which is if we dispose the product when its useful life is over, or if we recycle it, reuse it, repair it as part of the circular approach. So whatever we do with that product, all these stages have to be included. This is what we call life cycle approach, and the technique that is used for this purpose is called life cycle assessment. Now, life cycle assessment is what I do. I work on life cycle assessment projects academically, and also I provide consultancy to many different companies. So far, I work with companies in food industry, in electronics industry, appliance industry, finance industry. So all different industries, including apparel industry and textile industry, of course, will be affected by these policy changes that we mentioned earlier. So if these companies, if any company wants to adapt to this new world, to this new policy, they have to accurately measure their carbon emissions. And the way to do that is to employ a life cycle assessment approach and to use this standard method. Life cycle assessment is a standard method, so there is no ambiguity, there is no subjectivity. When you use life cycle assessment method, you get the same result anywhere with the same inputs and outputs. So this is what I would suggest to all industries.
Fantastic, thank you. And now for the last part, I would like to hand over to Beysin. Beysin, can we give us, we've talked about companies, innovation, collaboration, the full life cycle measurement of carbon emissions, the challenges between developed and developing countries. But where does the consumer come into play? Where do the consumers and their demands come into play? What's your take in this area? And with that, we will wrap it up. Over to you, Beysin.
So we can see a clear increase in interest for sustainable products. Having said that, this increased interest does not mean that customers are changing their shopping behavior. Sustainability is still not at the top of customers' reason for buying a product. A product must still fit customers' expectations in terms of fashion, fit, lifestyle, comfort, and of course, price. With the exception of a very small group of eco-conscious customers, sustainability is still considered a cherry on top, a nice-to-have element. In Turkey, there are also misconceptions about recycled materials. There are customers who see these products as inferior quality, and some even think they may be unhygienic. I think brands, NGOs, and government bodies should continue to increase awareness on sustainability concepts within fashion. So moving on, I would like to talk about Mavi's future of Mavi's sustainability journey. As I said before, we are always learning and progressing. Our immediate priority is to introduce sustainability targets and start working towards them. We will surely include targets related to our climate impact, supply chain, sourcing, and social performance. Alongside our social audits, we are going to introduce environmental audits to better understand our supply chain in terms of its environmental performance, and we are planning to start this with our most strategic suppliers. Circularity and eco-design are, of course, very important for us. We started working on circularity with our latest campaign called Mavi Dönüşüm, where we introduced our Mavi Pro Sport jeans. They are made with Reprieve, which is recycled polyester. In this campaign, we try to introduce recycling to our customers in a creative way. Circularity in apparel sector requires vast collaboration from many partners. To create our Mavi Pro Sport jeans, we engage with partners from all stages of our value chain, from raw materials to yarn, and from fabric to apparel manufacturing. We will try to engage with more partners to develop more projects on circularity. We are aware of the water-stressed conditions of Turkey. We already have projects with our denim manufacturers partners to reduce our indirect water use, but we are always open to more collaborations with regards to water use.
Fantastic.
Of course, we will continue introducing more and more sustainable products to markets that we operate in. We will try to increase the share of sustainable materials in our overall material footprint. As I said before, one part of this challenge is to secure organic cotton capacity. Finally, we are aiming to submit science-based targets within the next 2 years, and we joined the local Global Compact Office's Climate Ambition Accelerator program to this end. For apparel sector, setting a science-based targets requires Scope 3 target as well, which is directly related to supply chain and products. We welcome any collaboration to reduce our supply chain emissions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Beysin. I think that wraps up, this part of the panel. Marcello, from the bottom of my heart, thanks for coming in and joining us from Amsterdam. All our best to Holland, to you. Look forward to, as you were mentioning, seeing you in person in our next and upcoming conferences. Professor, all our best to Izmir, a great town to be in also, and your contribution has been really valuable. And Beysin, thank you, my friend from Mavi Company, of course, for all the contribution you have done. I think it was a phenomenally inspiring panel. I appreciate your contributions, and be safe, be healthy, and take care. All my best.